Now, this Nets situation is kind of nasty. A lot of things are going on right now. Again, Steve Nash got fired. I talked about it in my other video on the Beyond Half Court channel. So, again, follow me over there if you haven't already. But Steve Nash is gone. And if you ask me, it's been a while since he really should have been fired for. He should have been fired sometime last season. It was obvious that he was not a good X's and O coach. Really ISO heavy, very predictable offense. It definitely works out great when you have guys like Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving on your team. You're able to do that. But in the grand scheme of things, once you get to the playoffs, that offense is just too predictable. And especially in the East, there's some really great defenses like the Bucks, the Celtics, and even the Sixers to a certain degree. I don't think they're as good as those, the Bucks or the Celtics, but they're definitely a solid defensive team, and that's just not going to fly with them. And defensively, the Nets sucked as well. And that's the one thing that I will side with Nash is that even if he was a good defensive coach, which he isn't, because especially there's one game in particular that just should show everyone why he was such a bad coach. It was that they were playing the Mavericks and they kept switching Patty Mills as the primary defender for Luka. It just didn't work. Um, but yeah, so even if he was a good coach on the defensive end, I do not think he would have been able to coach this Nets team defensively because there just isn't enough defensive personnel. So a big reason the Nets are even looking at someone like Ime Udoka is because he was able to turn around, the Celtics defense last season, and now with him pretty much going to be done with the Celtics as far as we're aware. He's probably going to go to the Nets, but I do want to talk about that in just a second. Um, because there's a thought that came into my head, but I also want to talk about this Kyrie situation because, he posted on Twitter some sort of anti-Semitic movie. I believe it was a movie, and I think it was also a book, or it was based off a book. Um, I honestly didn't really bother to see what that movie was about. I think a lot of people were just in agreement that there was, stuff that was fabricated, not true at all. So I'm going to agree with most people. It's a huge thing. Um, I'm going to believe what people are saying on the internet. You can blame me for not doing my due diligence, but just in general, with that whole Kyrie thing, I was thinking, why isn't Kyrie getting um what's the word, punished for what he was doing, because he kept going into these press conferences and the reporters were setting him up not to like give a bad answer, but they were trying to make him like apologize. They're trying to get to the point where he'd be like, you know what, I'm not anti-Semitic and I apologize for the comments I made because they are harmful. But he just wasn't doing that. And I was thinking, like, when is this going to happen? And as soon as I thought that, they hit Kyrie with a 5-game suspension without pay. Um, so I thought that was kind of funny. It was perfect timing, but it makes sense, especially when you think back to the Myers Leonard situation. I believe either it was a season or two ago. I forget. It's time goes by so fast that like sometimes it feels like it happened just yesterday, but it really happened 2 years ago. So I don't actually remember what year it was, but it was fair. It was still fairly recently, a year or two ago. He pretty much got shadow banned from the NBA. And granted, he wasn't really that great anyway. He was mostly a role player anyway, so he was probably he was probably on his way out of the league anyway. But with someone like Kyrie, and like he's only 30 years old, like he still has a lot of playing time left. So it was going to be very interesting to see how they would even handle that Kyrie situation. It seems that they went with the 5-game suspension, and he's not actually able to come back until he, does a list of things that the Nets want him to do, like apologizing, that sort of stuff. And, I think that's going to happen because I think Kyrie does want to play basketball and he just wants to get this whole thing over with. But this whole thing, the Nets are just a mess. They've always been a mess, and I expected them to be a mess. Again, I made a video about it on my other channel, Beyond Half Court. But I never believed that the Nets were going to be able to figure it out because in the past year or two, they just haven't been able to do that in general, mainly because of injuries. But now it's to the point where just the roster construction is just so bad. There's no defense, and there's really not a lot of depth on this team as well. Ben Simmons is also experiencing some, health concerns. He's got a back and knee problem. Seems like he actually may be coming sooner rather than later back into that lineup, but it's still a concern just long term. And even in the minutes that he has played, he hasn't been as good as he was 2 seasons ago. A big reason why I thought Ben Simmons could definitely be a potential good piece for the Nets is because he was second place in Defensive Player of the Year, the actual last full season that he played. So I felt that if he came back with that same, skill level, that he was going to do a lot of great things for the Nets. But because of the injuries, and he's also been fouling out of games, he fouled out of 2 games, I believe. That's also like a big problem with him as well. He just had that same impact. And when you take everything else into account, with Nash being fired and now having to find a coach, and then the whole Kyrie situation, and even if you think about Ime Udoka coming in, he most certainly will probably improve that team, but he's also bringing baggage to the team as well. All of this is to say is, do we need to start reconsidering Kevin Durant trades? Because, when you think back to when Kevin Durant left the OKC Thunder, and this is when I'm going to bring up the Kevin Durant, when he slipped up on his tweets. He thought he was on his burner account, but he was actually tweeting on his actual Twitter account. Let me read some of these tweets because I think it's kind of damning, the situation that Katie is in now, and it's very reminiscent of his situation back when he was in OKC. So here we go. We have, imagine taking Russ off that team. See how bad they were? KD can't win a championship with those cats. Here's another one. So this guy at Cole Cashwell says, at KD Trey, man, I respect the hell out of you, but give me one legitimate reason for leaving OKC other than getting a championship. And Kevin Durant replies, he didn't like the organization or play for Billy Donovan. His roster wasn't good. It was just him and Russ. So the two, common denominators there is, it's Kevin Durant, and then it's Russell Westbrook. But in this case with the Nets, it's Kyrie Irving. And when you look at the statistics that the Nets are putting up, it's kind of ridiculous how similar it is to that entire situation with OKC. Right now, Kevin Durant is averaging 32 points on 52% shooting from the field, 34% from three, 94% from the line on almost 10 attempts a game. And Kyrie Irving, virtually 27 points on 45 from the field, 28 from three, not really that great, and 92% from the line. And again, this just looks to me as it's just KD and Kyrie. So who's not to say that Kevin Durant is feeling in this, he's in this sort of similar situation where there's not, there is, I guess the one thing is this Nets team is definitely more talented than that OKC team, because even though OKC had a lot of athletes and a lot of defenders, the spacing was the biggest issue with that, because outside of Kevin Durant, there really wasn't a lot of spacing when you go to look back. And even when you consider the timing of that, that roster being good, with 3-point shooting becoming a lot better, it still wasn't to the point where it is now. With the Nets team now, there is a lot of spacing, but there's not a lot of versatile defenders, which is kind of where we're at now, right? So we're at a very similar situation where this roster just is not set up well around Kevin Durant, just like that OKC roster. And I don't see why we can't be discussing Kevin Durant trades. And we can look back at the common denominators. We can look at the Celtics. Again, they'll have to, give up Jaylen Brown. That was already one of the rumored trades in the offseason. We can also look at the Raptors with Scotty Barnes. Again, I don't know if the Raptors are going to be wanting to they want to trade Scotty Barnes. I don't know if that's something that they want to do. Something that still is in mind is the Pelicans could potentially trade Brandon Ingram and get Kevin Durant back, and then you have Zion and Kevin Durant on the same team. But honestly, if I'm the Pelicans, that team is so young. I don't know if I want to break up that young core of BI and Zion just yet. I don't think Ingram's going to be as good as Kevin Durant. Not at all, but still, it's a young squad, so you kind of want to keep them together in the long run. And also, when you think about the fact that the Pelicans have the Lakers pick and they could potentially get Victor Wembanyama, I think they're definitely good just staying put where they are now and trying to compete as much as they can and just hope for a really good draft pick from the Lakers. So I don't know if the Pelicans would do it. Denver is also another interesting situation because you could potentially trade Michael Porter Jr. and like Aaron Gordon or something, but I don't know if that's enough for Kevin Durant. Maybe you have to throw Jamal Murray. I don't know if I would personally. And I don't even know if the Nets would want to take Jamal Murray because of the injury. So we'll just have to see about that. But again, we're in a similar situation now as we were in the offseason where it's like Kevin Durant might be traded. And when you really look at who he could be traded for, either the Nets are just going to ask for too much to the point where whatever team is going to be giving up assets like the Celtics, if they give up Jaylen Brown and like two other rotation guys, it's like, are the Celtics going to want to do that? Because then they lose out on their depth. And that's something I think that they have perfect. Like the team constructed now can win a championship. So do they really need Kevin Durant? Is kind of like my whole main point with that. And then also, is a team going to be offering enough for Kevin Durant to the point where when they add Kevin Durant, they're still going to be a really good team and they're not really going to give that much, but the Nets aren't going to accept that. So it's a very interesting situation. I feel like if a trade does happen, it's not going to be a win-win. I think someone is going to end up losing in this situation, at least for the short term. Long term, obviously, anything could happen, and it always depends on the trade. But when you just think about the short term, I think no matter what, either the Nets are going to lose the trade, they're not going to be able to get enough assets for him just because the situation is so weird, or whatever team trades for Kevin Durant is going to give up so much depth that, yes, they're still contending for a championship, but in the long term, is it really going to set them up for future success? We don't know, again, until a Kevin Durant trade happens. But that's kind of my whole thoughts about the Nets. Just a whole mess, just a big mess. And they're not even playing all that well either. The Nets are only 3-6, which is very similar to the Lakers, who are 2-6, and the Warriors as well, who are 3-7. Just a really weird start to the season. But the Nets in general, I did expect this sort of downfall for them. But this whole Kyrie situation definitely just, fast tracked everything. That was a clip from my podcast that you can watch by clicking here to see the whole episode. If you enjoyed, make sure you like and subscribe. See you on the next one. Peace out.